I think we're live. Oh, my audio. Jan. मॉनिटरिंग ऑफ करना पड़ेगा. क्या होता है ना, मॉनिटरिंग करते हैं कभी कभी ताकि पता चले कि क्या सुनाई दे रहा है लोगों को, तो वही चेक करने के लिए कुछ छोड़ा हुआ था. सो आई थिंक वी लाइव. आवाज़ बंद करते हैं. Yep. Hello, welcome to the stream. We are going to summarize the chapter 2 of Design of Everyday Things, this book. The chapter 2 of this book is, okay, let me put it this way. I was being very arrogant when I said I'm going to do one chapter every weekend, and while I was preparing the summary of this book, I very quickly understood that it's going to take a lot more than one stream per weekend to cover the whole chapter. I would say for, let's say, chapter 2, we'll have to go 2 to 3 parts. It's going to take 3 weekends to do chapter 2. The first part of chapter 2 is today, and today we're going to cover 2 to 3 topics of this chapter, which will include the introduction to the chapter. First of all, the chapter name is The Psychology of Everyday Actions. We do the introduction of this. The first section, which is how do people think, the gulf of execution and evaluation, and the 7 stages of action. These are the 3 topics we are going to cover today. Now, we'll start right away. And scene. And yep, so we're here. So this was the first part of the book, first chapter of the book, Psychopathology of Everyday Things. The second one is Psychology of Everyday Things. I think that's the chapter name. Let me be sure about it. Of Everyday Actions, my bad. See, I come prepared and still there are mistakes. So this is going to be actions. Alright, everyday actions. Now this chapter has a outline which I'm going to introduce first, although we are not going to cover the whole thing right away, but I'll still give you an overview of the chapter. The outline of the chapter is how do people think again, or sorry, how do people do things. That's the first topic of this chapter. Second is what happens when things go wrong. So while you're doing things, it's very natural that things might go wrong. And there are subsections to that. First is how we detect that something has gone wrong. Second part is how do we know what to do when things go wrong. To understand the above, which are these 2 topics, we study 2 subtopics, which is human psychology. Second is how people select and evaluate actions. And then we discuss conceptual models and the emotions of pleasure and frustration. And we take all of this, summarize it, and see how they relate to the principles of design. So that's the last section. We'll start first with how do people do things. Okay, before I start all this, I'm going to give you let's say a disclaimer of a sort. How I prepare these summaries are how I would prepare for my exams, for, let's say, engineering exams. Now I understand these are design topics, but how we used to prepare for engineering exams is I feel a very efficient way of learning. It's because we understood the concepts properly, we created notes out of them, we understood and summarized those topics for ourselves, and then understood the examples and created our own examples if required. So I'm going to use these techniques to um, make notes for myself and you guys and share it with you. Hello Samarveer, how are you? So also I'm trying to keep all the interactions at the end of the session, so if you have any messages, I will see them, but I'll respond to them at the end of the stream so that my flow for the session does not break. All right, so the first topic here is how do people do things, and the subtitle or the more important highlighted topic is the gulf of execution and evaluation. Now the most interesting part and the most important part of this topic is why do we call them gulfs of execution and evaluation. So first of all, what is a gulf? Gulf, the Gulf of Mexico or the Gulf of Saudi Arab, the one between this Arab and basically the Middle East, where the water is surrounded by lands from all over and has a narrow outlet for the water. So it's called Gulf because it's surrounded by land and has a very deep water body in between. It's very hard to cross. That's why. Now, these two gulfs of execution and evaluation are basically the same stream, metaphysically speaking, but as you can see here, one side of the gulf is the goal or the intention of the user. The other side of the gulf is the world or the environment. Now, when there is a gap between these two, the goal of the why am I getting nervous right now? Okay, when there is a gap between the goal and the world, there is a certain amount of entropy. There is a certain amount of energy that it takes for us to achieve these goals and implement them into the world. That gap, the energy and the amount of effort that we need to put is being called gulf here. And the amount of energy that it takes to from the world to us, for us to understand our environment, that also takes a certain amount of energy. So that's why it's also a gulf. So there's the energy from us to the world and the world to us. So when you try to cross this gap from the goal to the world, that's called the execution gulf. When you're trying to figure out what happens, then when the reverse happens, when you're trying to figure out how to operate a certain thing, that is called the gulf of evaluation. Wait, that's not it. I think these are written in reverse. So gulf of evaluation is when you're trying to figure out what happened. And the gulf of execution is when you're trying to figure out how to operate a certain thing. The goal is the expectation or the intention of user, basically. The gulf here means the gap or the amount of energy it takes the user to do a task. I sometimes call it the entropy. It's a word I have borrowed from physics and physical chemistry. Okay. So the gulf of execution, it is the gap of what and how to manipulate the environment to achieve your goals. So gulf of execution is you basically trying to understand how and what can you do to achieve your goal. And the gulf of evaluation is the gap of the state of the system and how well was the goal achieved. So we set out to achieve a goal, Was that goal achieved properly, and what was the quality of that achievement? Is basically we trying to analyze that is gulf of evaluation. All right. What happens is sometimes people try to, whenever something goes wrong during one of these processes, people blame themselves, which is not correct. They sometimes even decide that, okay, something is wrong with me. In both the cases, it is wrong. You should not blame yourself, and you should not think that you're incapable of understanding. It's always the design which is wrong. And this is what this book is proposing. I personally, however, think sometimes you can use this gap as a means of authentication as well. For example, you and me will not be able to fly a rocket ship. Why is that? Because of lack of experience, the lack of understanding of the machine, and lack of knowledge, expertise, and all these things. We can use these tricks to keep a certain level of need of expertise, the need of skills, and need of experience, and also need of focus to push back the users which we don't want, the users which we want to get away from. We don't want these users to be on our platform. Then you use these tools to send these people away. This is my concept. I completely want to keep it separate from the book. So this method of using lack of expertise, lack of skills, and lack of focus as a deterring factor for unwanted users is something I completely use it in my software sometimes. It has nothing to do with the book. But yeah, so what do we need to bridge the gap? There is a gap. People have to spend an amount of energy to understand what is to be done with a said product or a said situation. And people also do need to understand, have to spend a certain amount of energy to evaluate and check if what they have done is exactly what they needed to get done. And to bridge these two gulfs, we have to use, for execution, we use signifier, we use constraints, we use mappings, and we use conceptual models. To bridge the gap of evaluation, we use feedback and conceptual model. The example which the author has given in the book is basically he was in a, let's say, Airbnb for easier understanding, and the landlord of that place came and wanted to take out some papers from a drawer. She came, tried to open the latch of the drawer, and then tried to open the drawer so that they can take out the papers. So first she was able to open the latch, but when she tried to pull the drawer, it did not open. So the signifier was there that it should open when I pull it. The goal was set that I need to take out the paper from the drawer, but still it failed, and she did not know what to do. So there was a gap, there was a failure, and there was a failure in conceptual model most probably. And even the product might not be working as it was seemed to work or it was planned to work. So yeah, that's the example. All right, 7 stages of action. So there are 2 parts to any action according to the book. First part is execution of the actions, which is the doing part. The evaluation of the result, which is the interpretation part. Both of them require an understanding of how the items work and what result is produced. So when you set out to achieve one goal and to achieve a result, while doing it, another problem can arise which can lead to a secondary or sub goal. That is also a proposition. So while you're doing the actions, you might find a problem while in doing the action, and that can create another goal that you need to achieve the prior goal you have planned. So one goal and result cycle can lead up to multiple such cycles. While doing the act, there can be two types of states of mind we as humans can be in. One is the subconscious state, one is the conscious state. Subconscious state, generally people who are skilled and expert and do a certain task frequently, they go into subconscious state while doing a certain action. And mostly people who are learning or planning or deciding the sequence of actions or evaluating the result, they are mostly in conscious state of mind while doing the certain action. Now, as we talked about the two ends of this gap, first is the goal, the second is the world. To bridge the gap during the execution phase, the first step is plan, the second step is to specify, the third step is to perform the action itself. And when you're going from world to goal, when you're trying to evaluate, first step is to perceive, second step is to interpret what you have perceived, and the third step is to compare the result to the plan. So the seventh step, the first step is goal, which is not part of execution or evaluation, but the second step is plan the action to achieve the goal. The second is to specify an actions sequence. The fourth step is to perform the said actions in the sequence decided. This is the execution. The next part is fifth point, to perceive the state of the world. Six is the interpretation of the perception, and then to compare the outcome with the goal. This is the evaluation. So when an action cycle starts with a goal, so let's say you have all these 7 steps. When it starts from the top, when it starts from the goal, it's called a goal oriented or goal driven sequence. But when the trigger is actually the world, when the trigger is on this side of the river or the gulf, so you observe an event in the world and decide to take a sequence of actions, then it's called an event driven sequence. So as we have already discussed, there's two states of minds while you're trying to do a task or achieve a goal, which is conscious and subconscious. So not all of these actions are conscious, some of them are unconscious. Even the goal can be subconscious sometimes. A person can go through all these steps while being unconscious, not physically unconscious, just mentally unconscious would be the wrong word, but subconscious. And the goal can have sub goals, the plans can have sub plans, and at any point of the time while you're doing this plans and sub plans and goals and sub goals, you might forget, and a goal could be discarded or completely reformed. This we will come back to in 5th chapter, where we talk about errors, and this will become very important then. Then there are opportunistic actions, and the opportunity this comes into play when the actions are don't have a specific goal or don't have specific intentions, and these actions are called opportunistic actions. When the behavior takes advantage of the environment or circumstances, then it is called being opportunistic. It is less precise, is less mental effort, it's less inconvenience, and perhaps more interest. I've used green color because it's a more colorful comment on, about the interest that it perhaps is more interesting. The very important section where he talks about innovation is all these 7 stages of action are, can provide a guideline for finding new products or services. You can either look for these opportunities in the gulf itself in one of those steps, or do a root cause analysis by reconsidering the goals. So you can question the goal, find the, you know the level, step level, I would say. Like, goals have sub goals and sub goals and sub goals. You can find the main goal and then try to solve that, and that's called the root cause analysis. This is where radical ideas come from, according to him. So yeah, that's the summary of chapter 2 part 1, where we have already talked about the 7 stages of actions and the gulf of execution and evaluation. All right, now we can take questions. Hi, Samarveer. नहीं यार, याद है मेरे को. I remember you. How are you? All right. I think we'll stop this part here and we will come back next week to cover the other parts of the chapter. The the first part was pretty clear. I will share the link to this in the chat. So this is the link to the Miro board. And yeah, with that I'll end the stream. Thank you so much.